German shepherds guarding their vision of the truth. Immediate Eternity, the book, and Immediate Eternity, the CD. These are the promised works by Nevermore Inc. of Copernicus, which have now been released and are now available to the public. We urge the public to visit Copernicus's webpage, www.copernicusonline.net, and to receive all information regarding these books. On January 3rd, journalist George Gilson, January 3rd of this year, 2002, journalist George Gilson was traveling with the Whig Prime Minister in New York and offered to interview Copernicus after having read Immediate Eternity, the book. And that interview took place at the Drake Hotel. And it was a 3-hour non-stop interview by journalist George Gilson of Copernicus, and for the next 6 programs non-stop we will air that interview. As you know, George Gilson has interviewed Copernicus in the past as the book was being written, and now this final interview by George Gilson of Copernicus regarding Immediate Eternity will be aired today, part 1, and in the future we will continue with the 3-hour interview. Thank you very much. Remember, Copernicus webpage is www.copernicusonline.net. Thank you.
We're here to discuss your new book, Copernicus, which is Immediate Eternity. You've been working on it for quite a while, haven't you?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, there was a period when all that I had to say was spontaneous.
Mm-hmm.
It just came off the top of my head, and that's where the first 5 albums came right off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
And came a point where I started repeating myself and was not saying anything new. That started happening around 1996. I realized that to go deeper into the ideas that I had, the philosophical ideas, the vision that I had to stop and reevaluate the ideas and write a book, write them down, and by facing them, go deeper into them. And so I started writing this book. I'm not sure, I believe it's 1997 that I started.
Mm-hmm. This book came out in 2001.
Yeah.
I guess between September and December, right?
December.
In December.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And in fact, you make some mention of the terrorist attacks on the United States.
Well, I'll tell you that I predicted that. That was the terrorist attacks in that book was written in 1999.
Mm-hmm.
So that was actually predicted in the book.
Of course, there had been other attacks on U.S. interests in the immediately preceding years, in '93 or whatever it was, that and certain other instances.
Well, in the context that a country that uses violence has to get violence back. You just can't give violence one way. I don't care who you are.
Mm-hmm.
You could give violence and give violence. You got to get something back. You just don't do it. You know, Americans think that they're immune.
But aren't there times, wouldn't you say, that you have no other choice but to resort to violence? I mean, what do you do if somebody comes in and, you know, bulldozes your house down and kills your wife and children and does to you all the conceivable ills of the world? I mean, are you supposed to just turn the other cheek?
Is that what Christ taught?
That's what Christ taught.
Are you supposed to be a Christian?
That's what I'm asking.
Is the United States supposed to be a Christian country? Are you supposed to turn the other cheek? Are you supposed to have some understanding? Or are you supposed to take revenge? So I think this country, the United States, has to confront its own religion. Are they practicing their religion? Is this what Jesus would do?
But is it a Christian country, or is there a separation of church and state, would you say?
Well, well, I don't think there's a
Or is it- or is
separation
it
of
somewhat-
church. There's not a
or-
separation of church and state here. I mean, they in name only, but in name and legality. But this is, I mean, if a churches are tax exempt, that's not separation of church and state, in my opinion.
Right.
Where churches are paying taxes, that's then you have separation. No, churches are, especially Christian churches are in. They're a good thing, and they're in with the government, as they have been for many, many centuries all over the world.
I'm a little bit surprised about this sort of spontaneous, if you will, defense of Christianity when you have blasted organized religion in your book. Although in some instances, I do notice that you, directly or indirectly, speak with a certain degree of reverence about Jesus Christ. You allude to possibly having some kind of respect for Jesus Christ. I don't know.
I like Jesus Christ. He did his best. I mean, he didn't have any interesting vision as far as philosophy is concerned. He only dealt with myth. He didn't know what he was talking about. He was just dealing with myth. Mm-hmm. And he had some good, interesting social comments to make, which helps us to live a better life here in our personal relationships. But as far as philosopher, Jesus Christ is not a philosopher. He's taking myth, old myth, and heaven, hell. I mean, heaven and hell was invented by the Egyptians and God the Father. All that is Egyptian philosophy, and he just borrowed it. The Jews took it from the Egyptians, and Jesus took it from the Jews. And so Jesus, I don't even consider Jesus a philosopher. I consider him to be a social scientist. I mean, he,
But then, when you say that the United States doesn't live up, if you will, to its religion or the religion of...
What I detest is hypocrisy.
So that's exactly what you are criticizing then.
Hypocrisy, I don't care what religion you have, you're supposed to, if you don't live to it and you protest that I am this Christian, and you are using violence all the time. Mm-hmm. You're part of one of the most violent countries that ever existed on the face of the earth, called the United States of America. That's not Christian-like. That's not being a Christian. You're being, this attack on the World Trade Towers really challenged true Christians to be Christians. Mm-hmm. And Christianity does not teach revenge.
How did the attack challenge Christians to be Christians? Which Christians?
All Christians, because the basic message of Christ is pretty much the same for all Christians.
Well, from all the information we have, the attacks were carried out by Muslims.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So the Christians, in reacting, you're saying then, to these attacks should live up to what they say they believe in.
Right.
I see. An interesting thing that comes up...
We're not going to stay too long on Christianity.
No, we're not.
We're
getting into actually what you call subatomic level, atomic and subatomic level of reality.
Right.
And you talk about a lot of wars being fought in the name of religion, and that this is a waste of time and energy and so forth.
Man has done that from day one. That's why I say we're still living as the way man lived from the day he came down from the trees. Well, this is not anything advanced here. George Bush is not doing anything advanced. As far as I'm concerned, George Bush is living about maybe 4 or 5 million as man lived 5 million years ago. What's the difference if I hit you with a stone or I throw a rocket at you? It's the same. It's the same old man. It's the same old life, same old style.
Mm-hmm. So there's little moral advancement. But what I'm asking is this: one of the things that people sometimes hold against organized religion, and you seem to do so pretty clearly, is that evil deeds are carried out in the name of ostensibly or purportedly lofty ideals. And I wonder, how is it different when you are pursuing and hoping or thinking that you've obtained an absolute truth, and when these people have thought that they have obtained an absolute truth? Because when one fights in the name of religion, and when we saw these attacks, if they were carried out by the people that we think they were carried out by, and who in the aftermath claimed credit, quote unquote, or responsibility, more appropriately, for the attacks, they thought they were operating in the name of a lofty absolute truth, of the will of a single absolute
Well, that's
God
how man has acted all
who
his
has
life.
a single absolute justice.
Adolf Hitler acted from an absolute truth.
An absolute truth, exactly.
I believe Adolf
Exactly.
Hitler believed in
So,
his...
a lot of people would come around and tell you, Copernicus, that, hey, this absolute truth idea is bankrupt. This absolute truth idea has only brought us misery, destruction, violence, pain, and suffering. Why then insist upon having an absolute truth, even if it's a different one? Isn't any absolute... The question, isn't any absolute truth condemned, as some would see it, to failure and wrong?
No.
Why?
Because when an individual has a perception of the universe, and when an individual has a perception of the universe, and that is part of his consciousness. George, you distracted me with all the things you do back there. I can't talk, so...
No, I'm not distracting you. You go
Well,
ahead.
you're moving, drinking soda.
No, I'm just adjusting the camera. I'm doing my job. You do your job.
Okay. When you have a consciousness of the macrocosm and the microcosm, that's the tiniest worlds that things are, and the macrocosm. And if you have a philosophy that recognizes the true reality, a reality that is farther out from identity, because the identity-driven mind is the old way. When man came down from the trees, he believed he existed, and he saw his hands, his feet, his legs, and he believed he existed. But when you come to a vision that takes in the atomic and subatomic world, you lose that identity. I believe that concept of identity is one of the main forces that leads man to act in this horrendous way. And so part of what I have to say is that in the understanding of the subatomic world, you become relatively a part of the universe. You feel that you're a part of this universe, and you feel actually that your identity doesn't exist. You lose identity, and you become the universe itself. And in so doing, you don't revert to the Stone Age conduct, like Christians, Muslims, or whatever. Anybody that is reverting to violence.
But it seems that in a sense you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Yeah, you've understood that a sense of senses, if you will, of conflicting identities lead to violence and destruction. But can't you say that you can have an identity and still be conscious of your place in the universe, both on an atomic level and on a more complex composite level, synthetic level?
Identity is an illusion and a mistake, a serious philosophical mistake founded on ignorance. Okay, because if you say that you have identity, it means that you're not taking into account this little world called the microcosm. In my book, I refer to it as Magova. That's the atomic and subatomic world, basic, okay? And everything in the air, all the bones, your blood, and your skin, and everything you have is made up of these atoms. These atoms are in constant motion, and not to take that into account is to make a serious philosophical mistake. To start basing a philosophy on the fact that you are here, that you exist, meaning that you are the same person from one moment to the next. That's
No, I think that it is very possible that you can have a concept of yourself, of a self, of an identity, that is constantly changing. And yet it's an identity.
Well, that's a contradiction. You can't. That's one thing going against it. So how could you have something that is the same that is changing?
It's different. It's not identical, in other words.
Well, if it's different, then it means it's different.
Yeah.
That means it doesn't. It's never the same. Never. It's not like it's the same for a day and then it changes the next day. It's not like that. We're talking about it never is the same.
Yeah. So we're saying that different things are the same thing.
We're saying that George Gilson or Copernicus is never there. And George Gilson and Copernicus were never born. They don't exist, and therefore they cannot die. That's what we're saying.
And what do we do about the first?
You have to let me finish the answers. You have to let me answer.
All right.
You have to let me answer because.
But you have to let me also.
Well, then we'll do it. But
interact and
interact. But let me answer.
Sort of sparring. Go ahead.
So that that when we look at ourselves in the mirror and we see Copernicus. Copernicus looks at himself in the mirror and sees Copernicus. All he's visualizing with his senses is an illusion, because his senses cannot really see what is real. His senses can't perceive the atomic and subatomic world, and which is the reality of the situation. So what our senses perceive is an illusion, and man has been living with this illusion of his five senses since the day he's come back down from the trees, or since the time he was up in the trees. And this is the way it's been for 5 million years, and it's been a mistake.
One of the things that I find interesting about your theories here is that you make much of the fact that a lot of the religions didn't have the scientific data at their disposal. What we know today about atoms, about quarks, about biology, about genetics, about this or that or the other, they didn't know.
Although they did a good job in painting a reality with their myths, I think the religions have done a very, very good job. I mean, just take the Bible saying, "Let there be light." How could they possibly know? Okay, watch this. I mean, after the Big Bang, there were no stars. The universe was pitch black. It took time for all that matter to come to all that gas and matter to come together to create a star. So there was darkness and blackness out there, and the Bible says, "And God said, let there be light." I mean, that's exactly how modern science says it happened. That's very interesting. I find this. I find that these myths are wonderful.
Isn't that amazing?
It's wonderful.
It may not even be wonderful. It may just be very practical. Is it not possible that even before all this 5 million years, whatever, that there may have been other beings, other quote-unquote civilizations, other situations, existences, beings, whatever, where these things were known, where they actually may have observed, senses or otherwise, these things? Isn't it possible, conceivably? theoretically.
I don't really think that we're going back now 14 billion years.
Let's
when
say, yeah.
stars started
Or before.
started to be formed.
Unfathomable, unfathomable.
But
in our,
there is the religions are sometimes right on the money.
Yeah.
When it comes to,
So
they didn't say the Bible doesn't say there were always stars. They didn't say that. They said it was darkness, and then God made the light, and that's exactly how modern scientists say. But my concern in this book is we're flitting around the main theme of what
I'm about to hit it on the bullseye.
Go for it.
I think, because what we're talking about here, which is, in my opinion at least, extremely interesting, and in fact the challenge for contemporary and future religions, is this: the possibility, nay, the necessity, for these religions to marry whatever ethical and moral understanding that they've gleaned through history and through time with science, the empirical modern understanding. Although that brings us to another question that I'd like to touch upon next, which is, how can there be empiricism and observation and scientific progress if we don't exist? But first, let's take those two questions in order. Give us your thoughts in general terms, and then if you want to give us specific examples about the possibility of marrying religion and science.
Okay. There was one
modern science.
When man came down from the tree, he had a tail. Okay? If you touch the base of your spine, George, you'll find the vestiges of a tail.
All
okay?
right.
And if I take an X-ray of it, you'll see that.
You say so.
If you take an X-ray of it, you'll see that it was there. But man didn't need that tail after a while, and so through evolution, the tail lost and misuse and disuse. It lost its value. So I look at that as as a parallel to religions. I think religions served man very well. They gave man the best intelligent explanation of the universe and how things worked. Don't forget, these ancient man did not live like you and I, like you and me, in a room. They lived with the sky and the universe. When they went to sleep at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, but they went to sleep under the stars, and that was more of a reality for them than it is for us. And so they're creative thinkers.
Oh, is this going back to what you've actually also spoken about in your book about this 18th century noble savage,
no, they're creative.
Happy noble savage a la Jean-Jacques Rousseau?
They're creative thinkers, which we call priests. They're creative thinkers, created various worlds and gave life to rivers and life to the sun, and made the sun out of the God out of the sun. I'm recently in Ecuador, and I have a top of a mountain, and I've been living with the sun, and I can now understand how I could make a God out of the sun. If I was living with the sun every day and all the things the sun does for me, I really start to fall in love with the sun. I mean, living in a mansion or in a room or whatever, the sun is meaningless. It doesn't mean anything to you. But when you're out there in nature and you're living with the sun and it feeds you and it does all these good things for you, it warms you, I could see making a God out of it. So
you're digressing here. It seems to me you're trying to avoid the point. And
the point is that
this book is exactly what I was just talking about. This book is an attempt, good, bad,
you're
successful,
not letting me finish my question.
Failed. Well, you're going off track from a.
No, I'm not going off track. I'm trying to give you an answer.
All right.
The answer to your question is you're asking to marry myth and science.
That's what you're trying to do.
No, I'm sorry. I'm saying on the contrary. If you let me finish, what I'm saying is myth did serve man for a very long period of time. But now, with modern science, we don't need myth anymore. Myth has now become an enemy of man because it's producing people who are reading books that are 1,400 years old or 2,000 years old, and with that kind of Stone Age mentality, and they are now functioning in the modern world with a Stone Age mentality. That's very dangerous. That's very, very dangerous. That Stone Age mentality is going to bring the end of...
Yeah, but that's going to happen. I mean, you're always going to have, unless you have some kind of an absolutist, not absolute, absolutist situation where everybody must, in some way or another, for some reason or another, believe in one thing, you are always going to have different individuals, different people, or different groups, or whatever, at different stages of development. Unless everybody at once embraces one thing, such as your theory, for example, if that's possible. I mean, isn't that so? I mean, don't you accept that there can be different? I can believe in the Stone Age. You can believe in Magava. The other guy can believe in Allah.
Well, for example, the danger here, you see, Christians learned about this a long time ago when they unified the church and the state. When things got bad, the church recognized that they suffered. They went down with the bad times. They lost prestige, and the Muslims are going to have to find that out on their own. That when they join their government with their religion, when things get bad, the religion suffers also. Not only does the government. Mm-hmm. Okay.
When you mean theocracy.
Yes. Uh-huh. Yes. When you join government with the religion and a plague comes or bad times, real bad times come, you'll find that the religion will suffer. And I think you will find these guys that are hurling their religion as they murder people. They're going to find that their religion, they're defiling their religion. Their religion will suffer as a result of what they're doing. But the point is that I really care about is that modern science is got to replace religion, because religion does not understand how things work, really. They understand in a story-like way.
You've been viewing an interview by George Gilson of Copernicus at the Drake Hotel in New York City on January 3rd, 2002, regarding Copernicus' new book, Immediate Eternity, and also celebrating the release of the accompanying CD, Immediate Eternity. This interview is copyrighted by Nevermore Inc. in the year 2002. We refer all viewers interested in Copernicus to his webpage on www.copernicusonline.net. Thank you for viewing.